Have you ever felt like there's an invisible wall between you and God, blocking the very blessings you've been desperately praying for? Perhaps you've spent years reaching outward, sending prayers into what feels like an empty void, wondering why divine energy seems to flow freely into others' lives, but somehow bypasses yours completely. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about what you're doing wrong, but about where you've been looking? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere spiritual seekers trapped in a cycle of frustration, constantly straining to connect with a divine presence they believe exists somewhere out there beyond their reach. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, relationship breakdown, or financial emergency, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging for divine intervention, yet feeling that heavenly assistance remains frustratingly unavailable. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today doesn't just transform your prayer practice. It completely reimagines your relationship with divine energy and how it flows through every aspect of your daily life. The divine flow you've been seeking isn't blocked by some cosmic gatekeeper requiring the perfect passwords or rituals. It's blocked by a single misperception about where God actually is. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with spiritual practice. When you truly grasp that divine presence isn't something external you need to strain toward, but rather the very essence of your being waiting to be recognized, everything changes. Prayer transforms from desperate pleading to joyful acknowledgement of what already exists within you. Imagine approaching each day not as a separate entity struggling through life alone, but as a living channel through which divine energy naturally flows. Picture facing challenges not with fear and anxiety, but with an unshakable awareness that you can remove the internal blockages preventing divine intelligence from solving problems through you. This isn't positive thinking or wishful spirituality. It's practical mysticism that produces tangible transformation in your health, relationships, finances, and inner peace. The 5 steps I'll be sharing today have changed countless lives worldwide, not through magical formulas, but through a profound shift in spiritual understanding. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to convince an external deity to send blessings your way, and instead focused on removing the internal barriers that have been blocking the divine flow that has always existed within you, perfect and complete? If these teachings on removing blocks to divine flow resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each new video explores practical ways to experience the divine presence within. In these moments when divine energy seems most distant, the transformative journey begins with what Joel Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. A deceptively simple exercise that creates profound ripples throughout your consciousness. This isn't some complex meditation technique requiring hours of silence in perfect lotus position. It begins with a moment of recognition when you first wake up each morning, before your feet even touch the floor, before your mind becomes entangled in the day's demands. Pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, the kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine flow is my true nature. This tiny decision creates a foundation that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. The hidden revelation most spiritual seekers miss completely is that consistency matters far more than intensity. A brief moment of recognition practiced regularly throughout your day has infinitely more impact than occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a flood. Throughout your day, especially during moments of stress or challenge, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the moments when the practice reveals its transformative power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond external appearances. You'll begin noticing subtle shifts at first. A deeper peace in formerly stressful situations, unexpected solutions to persistent problems, a growing sense of guidance in daily decisions. These are signs that you're beginning to remove the internal barriers blocking divine flow. The transformations unfold gradually, but their cumulative impact completely reimagines your life experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this understanding applies to specific challenges we all face. Consider health issues, an area where fear can instantly overwhelm our spiritual awareness. When physical symptoms appear, our conditioned response is immediate panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. The breakthrough insight isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual understanding and appropriate action. When facing health challenges, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness, only divine perfection. This recognition doesn't replace medical care, but opens a channel for healing power that transcends material limitations. From this place of spiritual awareness, you can then make decisions about treatment with clarity rather than fear. Think about someone diagnosed with a chronic condition who's been told they'll simply have to manage symptoms indefinitely. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole, regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for healing that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. You don't ignore symptoms or avoid doctors. You simply bring a different consciousness to the situation. You address physical needs while maintaining awareness of spiritual wholeness. If you've experienced even momentary glimpses where you sense there's more to reality than what appears on the physical surface, write in the comments, "I recognize the wholeness within." This understanding extends far beyond personal healing. The same profound shift in consciousness transforms our relationship with money and material supply. When confronting financial challenges, most people immediately focus on external actions, working harder, cutting expenses, or frantically searching for new income sources. While practical steps matter, the mindset behind those actions determines their effectiveness. The breakthrough insight is returning to the consciousness of the inner kingdom, where divine supply is infinite and eternally flowing. Let me share something from behind the scenes of financial transformation. A businessman I worked with faced complete financial ruin after his partner embezzled company funds. Creditors were demanding payment, legal troubles multiplied daily, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Rather than focusing solely on these external circumstances, he began practicing kingdom consciousness each morning and throughout his day. At first, nothing external changed. Bills still arrived, creditors still called, but something shifted internally. The paralyzing fear that had blocked creative solutions began dissolving. From this awareness, right action emerged naturally. He found himself making different decisions, having conversations he would have avoided before, exploring options that fear would have previously ruled out. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that he couldn't have engineered through external manipulation. A former client offered a substantial new contract. An unexpected settlement came through. A strategic partnership materialized. These weren't random coincidences, but consciousness demonstrating its own abundance. The pathway to complete financial recovery opened up not through force or struggle, but through spiritual recognition. This journey of transformation requires something many modern seekers resist: patience. In our world of instant results, we expect immediate spiritual breakthroughs. The hidden truth is that this transformation develops gradually over weeks and months of practice. You won't master this understanding overnight, and that's perfectly natural. Joel Goldsmith himself spent years developing this consciousness through meditation, study, and practical application. What matters is that you begin today with whatever level of understanding you currently possess. The consistency of your practice matters far more than its initial perfection. Some days you'll maintain kingdom consciousness beautifully. Other days you'll forget completely and spend hours in anxiety before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Consider how a child learns to walk. There are many falls for each successful step at first, yet with persistence, walking eventually becomes effortless. The same principle applies to spiritual awareness. Each time you return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting, you're strengthening that awareness. The path isn't linear. It includes plateaus and even apparent setbacks. But the overall trajectory moves toward increasing spiritual recognition. The profound impact comes in recognizing that you aren't creating this kingdom through positive thinking or willpower. You're simply recognizing what has always existed within you, waiting for your awareness. This revelation transforms spiritual practice from effortful self-improvement to joyful discovery of your true nature. If you've ever experienced the frustration of spiritual growth seeming too slow or inconsistent, write in the comments, "I'm embracing divine timing." The beauty of this practice becomes even more evident when we learn to recognize the subtle transformations that signal our growing awareness. While our mindset often looks for dramatic breakthroughs or miraculous interventions, the true revelations come in quieter moments. As you practice returning to kingdom consciousness, notice the subtle shifts occurring within your daily experience. First, a deeper peace in situations that would have previously triggered stress or anxiety. Then, unexpected solutions appearing for persistent problems that seemed unsolvable from purely material thinking. And perhaps most profound, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These might seem like small changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in your inner landscape. You're beginning to live from kingdom consciousness rather than purely from material awareness. It's like learning to see with entirely new eyes. The world hasn't changed, but your perception of it has transformed completely. Where you once saw only problems, you now recognize opportunities. Where you once felt separation from good, you now experience divine presence. A woman in our community described this shift beautifully. After practicing kingdom consciousness for several months, she realized one day that her constant anxiety about the future had been replaced by a quiet confidence. Not because her external circumstances were more secure, they weren't, but because her awareness of the inner kingdom had become more consistent. This didn't mean she never experienced fear or worry again, but those emotions no longer dominated her consciousness or dictated her decisions. The secret pathway to experiencing these subtle shifts is persistence through the initial challenges. This is precisely where many spiritual seekers stumble on their journey. They begin this practice with enthusiasm, expecting immediate dramatic results, perhaps a miraculous healing or sudden financial windfall. When those instant miracles don't materialize, they conclude the approach doesn't work and abandon it. prematurely, returning to the familiar but limiting material consciousness. The critical insight is understanding that spiritual development follows natural laws just as physical growth does. Think about planting a garden. When you place seeds in soil, nothing visible happens immediately. For days or even weeks, you see no evidence of growth. If you grew impatient and dug up the seeds to check on them, you'd interrupt the very process you're trying to foster. Spiritual practice works similarly. The initial work happens beneath the surface of your awareness, creating a foundation for visible transformation that appears in divine timing. Those who persist through this initial phase discover something far more valuable than instant gratification. An inner resource that sustains them through everything life brings. They develop a spiritual resilience that isn't dependent on circumstances being perfect. Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. We're dedicated to translating these profound mystical insights into practical steps you can apply immediately in your relationships, work, and inner peace. A businessman shared with me that after 6 months of consistent practice, he faced a crisis that would have previously sent him into panic and despair. Instead, he found himself responding from kingdom consciousness automatically without the effort it had required earlier in his journey. The practice that had once seemed difficult had become his natural state. This represents the maturation of spiritual awareness. What begins as conscious effort gradually becomes spontaneous expression. If you're committed to discovering the kingdom within, regardless of how long it takes, write in the comments, "I'm in this for the long journey." Now, I want to explore perhaps the most profound transformation that occurs when we remove the barriers to divine flow, the way it completely reimagines our relationships with others. Think about the people who challenge you most, that co-worker who constantly criticizes, the family member who triggers old wounds, or the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Our instinctive reaction is defensiveness, judgment, or withdrawal. But kingdom consciousness offers an entirely different pathway when interacting with difficult people. The breakthrough insight is recognizing that the divine presence exists within them too, perfect even when obscured by stress, fear, or fatigue. Their behavior may not reflect this spiritual reality, but that doesn't diminish its truth. This recognition isn't about excusing harmful actions, but about seeing beyond the surface to the deeper reality. Imagine returning home after a challenging day to find your partner irritable and distant. From material consciousness, you'd likely react defensively or withdraw emotionally. But from kingdom consciousness, you recognize that they're dealing with their own challenges, that the divine presence within them remains perfect even when obscured. This recognition allows you to respond with compassion rather than escalating the tension. I witnessed this transformation in a corporate environment where 2 executives had been locked in conflict for months. After one began practicing kingdom consciousness, the entire dynamic shifted. Rather than reacting to perceived attacks, she began seeing her colleague through spiritual eyes, recognizing the pressure he was under and the divine intelligence operating even through his challenging personality. Without a single conversation about their conflict, the relationship transformed as her perception shifted. The revelation many spiritual seekers miss is that living from kingdom consciousness doesn't mean escaping daily challenges, but meeting them from a spiritual foundation. This isn't about floating above human experience in some mystical bubble. It's about engaging fully with life's complexities while maintaining awareness of the spiritual dimension behind all appearances. This journey includes both successes and setbacks. Some days you'll maintain spiritual awareness beautifully throughout challenges. Other days you'll fail completely and spend hours in anxiety or anger before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Behind the scenes of spiritual growth, each return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting builds neural pathways that make this awareness increasingly natural. What initially requires conscious effort gradually becomes your default perspective. The businessman who once struggled to maintain spiritual awareness for even minutes eventually finds it becoming his natural state throughout the day. The decision to practice kingdom consciousness transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for spiritual recognition. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on divine presence. Traffic delays offer space for inner communion. Challenging conversations become invitations to see beyond appearances to the spiritual reality within others. Life itself becomes your spiritual practice, an ongoing opportunity to remove the barriers that block divine flow. The beauty of this approach is how it infuses even the most mundane activities with profound meaning. That stack of paperwork on your desk? No longer just tedious tasks, but opportunities to express divine order and intelligence. The grocery shopping. Not just errands, but a chance to recognize abundance flowing through every aspect of your experience. If you've experienced those moments when spiritual awareness suddenly breaks through in the midst of ordinary activities, write in the comments, "I recognize divinity in the everyday." The true beauty of this practice emerges when we observe how it gradually transforms our entire experience of life. Over months and years of dedicated practice, something truly profound begins to shift in your awareness. The kingdom consciousness that once required deliberate effort becomes increasingly natural, like learning a language that eventually allows you to think in it, rather than mentally translating every phrase. You'll notice that you automatically return to spiritual truth more quickly after being momentarily pulled into material fear or concern. This isn't something you force. It's the natural evolution of consistent spiritual recognition. Think of it as building momentum on a journey. Those initial steps require the most energy, but as you continue forward, you develop a rhythm that carries you naturally. A friend described this experience beautifully, saying that after a year of practice, she realized her first thought in challenging situations had shifted from panic to peace. Not because she was trying to be spiritual, but because kingdom consciousness had become her default perspective. The evidence of this transformation appears in practical ways throughout your life. Solutions to problems appear more readily because you're accessing the infinite intelligence of the kingdom within, rather than relying solely on limited personal thinking. Peace becomes more consistent because it's anchored in spiritual reality rather than fluctuating circumstances. Relationships deepen because you're interacting from authentic spiritual awareness rather than ego needs and defenses. The hidden revelation that transforms this journey is letting go of expectations for immediate dramatic results. Our culture conditions us to expect instant transformation, the spiritual equivalent of before and after photos on a weight loss program. But consciousness doesn't transform that way. The changes unfold organically, often so subtly that you don't notice them happening in real time. You may not even recognize the cumulative effect until you look back after 6 months or a year and realize how profoundly different your life has become. One of the most remarkable transformations occurs in your professional life. As kingdom consciousness becomes your natural state, work shifts from being merely a means of survival to an authentic expression of divine creativity flowing through you. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea. It manifests in tangible ways that transform your entire relationship with your career or business. A designer in our community described this shift beautifully. Where she once struggled for inspiration, constantly fighting creative blocks and deadline pressure, she now experiences a natural flow of ideas because she's tapped into infinite intelligence rather than relying solely on personal ability. Her work became not just more productive, but more fulfilling, an expression of spiritual essence rather than ego achievement. The behind-the-scenes revelation is how this consciousness transforms your relationship with challenges. Obstacles that would have previously overwhelmed you begin to feel like interesting puzzles to solve from spiritual awareness. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety now becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult client interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to recognize the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. If you've started to notice your work becoming more of an authentic expression of something greater than yourself, write in the comments, "I'm becoming a clear channel." Now, I want to go even deeper into what may be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of removing the barriers to divine flow. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypass. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. This peace becomes your foundation through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response, not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing beyond intellectual understanding that the kingdom of heaven within had proven itself faithful through the darkest experience of her life. This wasn't resignation or spiritual bypassing, but direct experience of spiritual reality, transcending even death itself. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from conceptual knowledge to lived reality. You know from direct experience that spiritual consciousness is the only reliable foundation because you've tested it through real-life challenges. Material conditions fluctuate constantly, but inner truth remains eternally steady. This doesn't make you immune to human emotion, but provides a deeper context for those emotions, like waves on the surface of an ocean that remains undisturbed in its depths. Let's be honest about what this path truly requires. The transformation we're discussing demands a level of commitment that most spiritual seekers are unwilling to make. This isn't a weekend workshop or a 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. It requires daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate results. Faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely. And patience through the sometimes painfully gradual development process. Joel Goldsmith taught this path to thousands of students worldwide throughout his ministry. Some experienced dramatic breakthroughs within months. Others worked diligently for years before significant changes appeared visibly in their experience. A few grew impatient and abandoned the practice when immediate miracles failed to materialize. The decisive factor wasn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. This commitment represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our approach to spiritual growth. Our culture has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in every area of life, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revelation that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. If you've experienced that profound peace that transcends understanding, even briefly during a difficult time, write in the comments, "I've felt the kingdom's steadiness." The profound insight that stands at this crossroads of your spiritual journey is that you can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special spiritual credentials or decades of study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there. It will always be there. Your recognition doesn't create it, but simply reveals what already exists eternally. This is perhaps the most liberating revelation of all. The divine flow isn't blocked by your lack of knowledge or spiritual achievement. It's only blocked by a misperception about where God actually is. The transformation begins with a single moment of recognition. The kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual perfection exists in consciousness regardless of material appearances. Simply start today, this moment, by recognizing as often as you remember this fundamental truth. Practice this recognition in the morning, throughout challenges before sleep. Be patient with yourself through the inevitable inconsistency. Celebrate small victories. Learn from temporary setbacks. What makes this approach uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to change who you are or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. It simply invites you to recognize your true nature that has always existed beneath the surface of material appearances. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. The barriers to divine flow begin dissolving naturally through consistent recognition rather than through spiritual force or willpower. This isn't about creating something new, but unveiling what has always been there. The journey of awakening to kingdom consciousness doesn't happen in isolation. As your awareness deepens, it naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives. Around you, spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. As the barriers to divine flow dissolve in your consciousness, you naturally become a clearer channel for this truth to reach others. This sharing rarely happens through preaching or persuasion. It occurs organically through your transformed presence. People notice the difference in how you respond to challenges, the peace you maintain in chaos, the compassion you extend. Where judgment once dominated, they're drawn to something they sense in you that they intuitively recognize as authentic. A business executive described how, after practicing kingdom consciousness for nearly 2 years, his entire leadership style transformed. Where he once led through force and fear, he now inspired through spiritual presence. His decisions emerged from inner listening rather than external pressure. Team members didn't necessarily know the source of this transformation, but they responded to its authenticity. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from intellectually appreciating concepts to embodying them naturally in everyday interactions. You become a living demonstration that removing the barriers to divine flow creates not just personal transformation, but a ripple effect of healing in all your relationships and environments. If this understanding of becoming a clear channel for divine expression resonates with something deep within you, write in the comments, "The kingdom flows through me." As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that Joel Goldsmith often emphasized. Spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. Your journey of recognizing the kingdom within doesn't happen in isolation. It ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. If these teachings have resonated with something deep within you today, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. Simply write, "The kingdom within awakens," so I know you've journeyed with me to the end of this exploration. Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in this perspective on stopping the blockage of divine flow, consider gently tapping that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a way of affirming that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a small gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. And if you're feeling called to continue this journey of spiritual discovery together, subscribe to join our growing community of seekers committed to recognizing the divine presence in everyday life. We're exploring these profound truths every week, translating mystical understanding into practical living. There's a video right here about practicing the presence throughout your day that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to maintain spiritual awareness through the specific challenges and opportunities of daily living. Until next time, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition. Have you ever whispered a prayer into the void, desperately seeking an answer from a God you've been taught lives somewhere far beyond the clouds, only to feel nothing? That profound emptiness that comes when the words seem to evaporate before they even leave your lips? What if I told you that the very act of saying "I am" in the right way could transform your entire spiritual reality in an instant? What if the divine presence you've been searching for your whole life has never been distant at all, but has been breathing through you, looking through your eyes, beating in your very heart this entire time? There's a sacred secret that the mystics have guarded for centuries, a truth so powerful that once you truly understand it, your relationship with the divine will never be the same again. It's the recognition that Christ is not a person you worship from afar, but a living presence expressing itself as your deepest identity. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize everything you thought you knew about spirituality and your connection to the infinite. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's something most people never realize. There comes a moment in every genuine seeker's journey when the outer forms of religion begin to feel hollow. Not because faith has failed you, but because your consciousness has evolved beyond the limitation of believing that God resides somewhere outside of yourself. Has this ever happened to you? That nagging feeling that there must be more to spirituality than rituals, traditions, and second-hand beliefs. That quiet stirring in your soul that whispers, there's a deeper truth waiting to be discovered. The question that begins to emerge from the depths of your being is profound and intimate. Where is God, really? Not the God of doctrine and debate, not the distant deity of reward and punishment, but the living presence that prophets spoke of, that mystics experienced, that Jesus himself embodied. And here's the breakthrough that changes everything. The answer doesn't lie in any sacred text, any religious institution, or any external authority. The answer lives in the silence within you. You see, the word Christ has been so misunderstood for so long that humanity has missed its most liberating truth. Christ is not a surname, not a historical label reserved for one man who walked the hills of Galilee 2,000 years ago. Christ is a state of divine being, a level of consciousness, the very presence of God expressing itself through individual awareness. Because this presence is infinite and omnipresent by its very nature, it cannot possibly be limited to one person, one religion, one moment in history, or one corner of the world. The Christ is that universal light that illuminates every soul that enters this world. And what I'm about to show you is how to let that light flow through you by understanding the power of the words "I am." Think about this for a moment. Every time you say "I am," you're actually speaking the most sacred name of God. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. The Christ that has been so mystified and placed on unreachable pedestals throughout history is not some distant figure you need to worship from afar. It's the very presence looking through your eyes right now as you watch this video. It's what breathes your breath, beats your heart, and thinks your thoughts. This is the transformation of understanding that shifts everything, because once you realize this, you can never go back to seeing yourself as just a small, limited person struggling through life. When Jesus used the word I in his most powerful declarations, he wasn't talking about a carpenter's son from Nazareth. He wasn't identifying himself as a separate human being who somehow became more special than everyone else. He was speaking from that eternal I am, that infinite divine consciousness that existed before time and will continue beyond all form. And here's what religion didn't tell you. That same I am is your true nature, not something you need to earn, not something reserved for the enlightened few, but the fundamental reality of who you already are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, fear, and false identity. This isn't just spiritual philosophy or beautiful poetry designed to make you feel better for a moment. This is the hidden truth behind every genuine mystical experience throughout human history. The real journey of awakening happens when you stop trying to become something and start recognizing what already is. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to find this truth through more reading, more studying, more accumulating of spiritual knowledge. They think transformation comes from the next book, the next teacher, the next revelation that will finally give them the missing piece of the puzzle. The reality is far simpler and far more profound. True spiritual realization doesn't come through intellectual gymnastics or emotional highs. It emerges through something the modern world has almost completely forgotten: silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a surrendered mind. In that stillness, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to discover that you were never actually a person searching for God. You begin to recognize that you are the presence through which God reveals itself. The seeker and the sought are one and the same. If you're hungry for more of this kind of deep spiritual insight, subscribe to the channel. This is where we explore truths that often get overlooked, and I'd love to have you as part of this community of genuine seekers. This is the mindset shift that changes your entire experience of existence. When you become still enough, quiet enough, surrendered enough, you hear a whisper rising from the depths of your being: I am here. I am the life of you. I have never been absent. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding the power of saying I am correctly is what allows this divine presence to flow through you without obstruction. And what I'm about to share with you explains why so many spiritual seekers remain stuck in cycles of seeking without ever finding. If this is resonating with you, write in the comments, I am ready. Here's where we need to understand something that has shaped 2,000 years of spiritual confusion. When a genuine revelation enters the world through an awakened individual, its purpose is never to elevate that person above everyone else. The revelation comes through someone precisely to show others that the same consciousness is available to them. Jesus didn't come to display a unique spiritual privilege that only he could access. He came to reveal the divine identity that belongs to every single human being walking this earth. But something very human happened after he left, and it's the same pattern that has repeated throughout spiritual history. Instead of recognizing the presence behind the man, humanity began worshipping the man and completely forgetting the presence. We took the messenger and made him the message. We built elaborate systems, doctrines, and institutions designed to admire Jesus from a distance rather than entering into the very consciousness from which he spoke. This wasn't done with malicious intent. It happened because the human mind, when confronted with something it cannot fully comprehend, clings to what it can see and understand. The form, the person, the historical figure. And in that clinging, the living truth gets buried under layers of ritual and reverence. Think about the impact of this decision made centuries ago. Every major spiritual teacher throughout history has pointed beyond themselves to a universal truth, yet their followers almost inevitably turn them into objects of worship. The transformation that was meant to happen within each individual gets projected outward onto the teacher, and suddenly you have a religion instead of a realization. This is the hidden mechanism behind why so many sincere spiritual seekers remain stuck in devotion, without ever experiencing the awakening that was being offered. Jesus made his intentions crystal clear, but we've somehow managed to miss them for 2 millennia. He said directly, "You are the light of the world," not "I am the only light." He declared, "The works that I do shall you do also, and greater works than these." Not "admire what I do from afar because you could never do it." He prayed that all may be one even as we are one, showing that the union he experienced with the divine was meant to be experienced by everyone. His entire mission was to awaken the same realization in others, not to become an idol. But here's what happens every single time. When the teacher leaves the physical world, the human mind, unable to grasp the depth of what was actually being revealed, clings desperately to the form of the teacher and loses the spirit of the teaching. A living revelation gets frozen into doctrine. A spiritual identity becomes a creed you recite without understanding. The journey of transformation becomes a set of beliefs you're supposed to accept rather than a consciousness you're meant to embody. And this is precisely why so many people today feel spiritually hungry despite being surrounded by religious traditions. The revelation Jesus brought was never about him. It was about the I am that he recognized as his true nature, and that same I am lives as you. But to access it, you have to make a fundamental shift in how you approach spirituality itself, moving from worship to recognition, from seeking to being. If you're beginning to see this differently now, type in the comments, "I see it now." This is where the entire direction of spirituality went off course. Religion did something well-intentioned but ultimately devastating. It preserved the biography of Jesus while completely losing the revelation of the I am that animated him. We learned about where he was born, what he said, where he traveled, how he died, and how he rose again. We memorized the stories, built the churches, created the rituals, but we missed the actual revelation he came to deliver. And because of that missed connection, humanity has been praying to God as though God were somewhere out there, seeking a kingdom in some distant heaven, believing that the works Jesus performed are forever impossible for ordinary people like us. This represents the most profound failure of identity in human spiritual history. When you believe that the Christ consciousness belongs exclusively to one man who lived 2,000 years ago, you automatically separate yourself from the very presence that is seeking to express itself as you. It's like standing in the sunlight while insisting the sun only shines on one specific mountaintop somewhere far away. The impact of this misunderstanding has kept billions of souls trapped in a cycle of seeking without finding, praying without connecting, believing without experiencing. We've been looking outward when the entire journey requires looking inward. We've been searching upward when the kingdom has always been within. The mindset shift that changes everything is recognizing what Jesus actually meant when he spoke those powerful declarations. When he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he wasn't describing a human personality or claiming exclusive spiritual authority. He was speaking from the infinite identity that is the life of all creation. This is the same I am that spoke to Moses from the burning bush, saying, I am that I am, not I was or I will be, but I am, present tense, eternal, unchanging. This is why Jesus could make that statement that confused so many people. Before Abraham was, I am, not I was, which would imply he existed as a person before Abraham. He said, I am, because he was speaking from the timeless, eternal presence that exists beyond all form and history. Here's the revelation that transforms everything. The I am that Jesus spoke from is exactly the same I am that you speak from every single time you say, I am. There's no difference in the nature of that presence. The only difference is in the level of recognition and identification. Jesus recognized himself as that eternal I am completely, without reservation, without the interference of personal identity. Most of us identify the I am with our temporary conditions, our bodies, our stories, our limitations. But the truth remains unchanged. The divine presence speaking through him is the same divine presence speaking through you right now. This isn't just inspiring spiritual rhetoric designed to make you feel better temporarily. This is the hidden truth behind every genuine mystical experience across all cultures and traditions. The I am is universal, impersonal, infinite, and it expresses itself through every point of consciousness in existence. Understanding this shifts your entire relationship with spirituality from seeking something external to recognizing what's already present. And that recognition is what allows the divine to flow through you without obstruction. Type in the comments, I am that I am. When Jesus made that statement that has puzzled theologians for centuries, I and the Father are one, he wasn't claiming something unique to himself. He was revealing what is eternally true of every soul that has ever existed or will exist. But here's where the confusion enters, because human thought automatically identifies with the body, with personality, with the story of me. We assumed Jesus must have been talking about his particular person being specially united with God. We created entire doctrines around the idea that Jesus alone could say this, that he possessed some exclusive divine status unavailable to the rest of humanity. But think about this logically for a moment. No person, no matter how enlightened or spiritually advanced, can be one with the infinite. The finite cannot merge with the infinite and remain finite. Only the infinite can be one with the infinite. What Jesus was revealing is that the I he spoke from wasn't the carpenter from Nazareth at all. He spoke from the Father consciousness itself, from God awareness, from that place where there is no personal identity whatsoever, only divine expression. And that same consciousness, that same I am, lives as you. Not will live, not might live if you become good enough or spiritual enough. It lives as you right now in this very moment. This understanding creates a massive shift in how you use the most powerful two words in any language, I am. Every single time you say I am, you're invoking the divine presence that Jesus embodied. You're speaking the sacred name of God. But here's where most people unknowingly sabotage their entire spiritual journey. They attach I am to temporary conditions and limitations. I am sick. I am broke. I am afraid. I am not good enough. I am struggling. When you make these declarations, you're taking the infinite divine presence and identifying it with the finite temporary appearance. You're taking the eternal and chaining it to the temporary. If this video sparked something within you, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are searching for these truths right now. Jesus understood this with absolute clarity, and that's why his words carried such transformative power. He refused to identify the Christ consciousness with any condition. He never said, I am weak, or I am limited, or I am just man. Instead, his declarations always came from the standpoint of eternal identity. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread of life. Every statement anchored the I am in its true nature, infinite, eternal, unlimited. This wasn't positive thinking or affirmation. This was recognition of what is actually true beyond all appearance. The impact of understanding this cannot be overstated. Your words aren't just sounds you make. They're creative acts that shape your experience of reality. When you say I am followed by anything, you're making a declaration about your identity, and your entire life will organize itself around that declaration. The hidden mechanism behind manifestation, healing, and transformation isn't some magical force you need to learn how to manipulate. It's simply aligning your declarations with the truth of what you already are, allowing the divine to flow through you without the obstruction of false identity. Put in the comments, I am the light. There was a man named Joel Goldsmith who spent decades in deep contemplation, sitting in silence for hours and sometimes days at a time, not seeking religious answers, but pursuing direct experience of reality itself. What he discovered through this profound inner journey completely revolutionized spiritual understanding for thousands of people. He realized that the Christ is not an attribute you develop, not a quality you cultivate, not even an experience you have. The Christ is the invisible presence of God, expressing itself as individual being. It's the spiritual identity that lives right where you think your personal self resides. This was a revelation that shook the foundations of traditional religious thought. Joel understood something that religion has struggled to communicate: that Christ is not confined to Jesus. It's the eternal selfhood that existed before your body was formed and will continue to exist long after the body dissolves into dust. Every healing that has ever occurred, every moment of abundant supply, every flash of spiritual illumination, none of these come from a person asking God for favors. They come from the Christ revealing itself as the truth of being. This shifts the entire paradigm from seeking to recognition, from effort to grace, from becoming to being. But here's where things get even more transformative. Joel discovered that God is impersonal. Now, before your mind rejects this idea, understand what impersonal actually means. It doesn't mean distant, cold, or uncaring. It means free of human attributes, free of partiality, free of the preferences and prejudices that we humans project onto the divine. Religion couldn't teach this because the human mind desperately wants a God with a face, a God with form, a God who thinks and feels like we do. We want a God who loves us specifically, who answers our prayers personally, who takes sides in our conflicts. But the moment you make God personal in that way, you create separation. You establish a gap between you and the infinite that doesn't actually exist. The hidden truth is that God does not act upon you from some external location. God expresses as you. God doesn't send blessings down from heaven like packages being delivered. God is the blessing that is your very life, your breath, your consciousness, your existence. This understanding liberates you from centuries of spiritual begging, pleading, and bargaining with a deity you imagine is watching from above, deciding whether you deserve help or not. The impersonal nature of God means something extraordinary. God is pure love that does not fluctuate based on your behavior. It doesn't come and go depending on whether you've been good or bad, faithful or doubtful, worthy or unworthy. It simply is. And because it's impersonal, it's everywhere equally. It's the same presence in the saint and the sinner, the enlightened and the ignorant, the rich and the poor, There's no favoritism, no special treatment, no divine politics. The sun doesn't shine only on those who deserve it. It shines on everyone without distinction. That's the nature of the impersonal God expressing through all of creation. This revelation changes the entire approach to spirituality because you stop trying to manipulate or convince God to help you, and you start recognizing that the divine presence is already the substance of your being, waiting only for your acknowledgement. Write in the comments, God is my being. So how do you actually allow this divine presence to flow through you? How do you move from understanding these concepts intellectually to experiencing them as living reality? The answer is simpler than you might think, but it requires a fundamental shift in your moment-to-moment awareness. The Christ within you doesn't need to be awakened because it's already fully awake, fully present, fully alive. What needs to awaken is your recognition of it. And that recognition begins with a single decision in the face of every challenging circumstance. Whenever fear appears, pause. Whenever lack shows up, pause. Whenever conflict arises, pause. In that pause, something crucial happens. You create space between the condition you're experiencing and your identification with it. Instead of immediately reacting from the perspective of "I am afraid" or "I am lacking," you withdraw your attention from the appearance and turn it toward the "I am" that is aware of the appearance. You ask yourself a simple but profound question. Who is the I that is aware of this fear? Who is the I that notices this lack? This question, when asked genuinely in the silence of contemplation, begins to reveal something extraordinary. The I that is aware of fear cannot itself be afraid. The I that observes lack cannot itself be lacking. The I that witnesses pain cannot itself be suffering. You start to sense that there's a dimension of your being that remains untouched by all conditions, completely free, completely whole, completely at peace, regardless of what's happening in the external world. This isn't positive thinking or denial of what you're experiencing. This is recognition of what is actually true beneath the surface of appearance. The practice deepens as you realize that recognition is fundamentally different from affirmation. Affirmations try to make something become true through repetition. Recognition acknowledges what already is true. You're not trying to create a spiritual reality. You're unveiling the spiritual reality that has been present all along, hidden only by the habit of identifying with temporary conditions instead of eternal presence. This shift in perspective is what Joel Goldsmith called the end of personal sense, and it's perhaps the most liberating transformation that can happen in human consciousness. Personal sense is the deeply ingrained belief that you are a separate being with private fears, private burdens, private responsibilities. It's the feeling that life is happening to you, and you must manage it, control it, fix it, improve it through your own effort. As long as you live from this personal sense, you're operating outside the natural rhythm of the Christ. You're like a wave trying to sustain itself independently from the ocean, exhausting yourself with effort when you could simply rest in the recognition that you are the ocean expressing as a wave. The greatest spiritual attainment isn't the acquisition of some special power or ability. It's the end of the personal I, not the destruction of your individuality or uniqueness, but the dissolving of the belief that your individuality exists separate from God. When this false sense of separation dissolves, life transforms from struggle to flow, not because circumstances necessarily change, but because your identity changes. You no longer react from fear, you respond from presence. You no longer operate from effort, you move from grace. Type in the comments, "I release personal sense." You might be wondering why this profound teaching about the Christ within, about the I am identity, about the end of personal sense. wasn't given openly to the masses from the very beginning? Why did it remain hidden, passed quietly from mystic to mystic, from teacher to sincere student, whispered in meditation halls and revealed in moments of deep contemplation? The answer isn't conspiracy or exclusivity. It's about readiness. Human consciousness simply wasn't prepared to receive this revelation for most of our history. Think about the journey of humanity's spiritual evolution. For thousands of years, we've lived under a kind of collective hypnosis, completely identified with physical form, convinced that we are separate beings made of flesh and bone, isolated from each other and from God. A world that fundamentally believes in separation cannot bear the revelation that separation has never actually existed. It would be like trying to explain quantum physics to someone who hasn't yet learned basic mathematics. The framework for understanding simply isn't there yet. The teaching had to live quietly, transmitted heart to heart, not because it was meant to be secret, but because it was sacred. It required a level of inner maturity, a softening of the rigid personal identity, a readiness to let go of everything you thought you knew about yourself. You can't force this awakening. You can't impose it through doctrine or demand it through authority. It emerges naturally when consciousness has evolved to the point where it can receive it without distortion. And something remarkable is happening right now in this moment of human history. Enough souls have reached that threshold of readiness that the ancient truth can resurface openly. The transformation happening globally isn't just technological or social, it's deeply spiritual. People everywhere are growing weary of external authority, tired of dogma that doesn't match their inner knowing, exhausted from seeking God in distant heavens while suffering continues on earth. The old paradigm of separation is crumbling, and in its place, a new recognition is dawning. Not new in the sense that it's recently been discovered, but new in that it's becoming accessible to masses of people rather than just isolated mystics. This is why you're watching this video right now. This is why these words are resonating somewhere deep within you. Your own consciousness has ripened to the point where you're ready to move beyond belief into direct experience, beyond worship into recognition, beyond seeking into being. The invitation that stands before you now is the same one given by every awakened soul throughout history, but delivered in language that your consciousness can finally receive. The entire spiritual path, when you truly understand it, isn't about acquiring anything at all. It's about releasing everything that is not you, every false belief, every limitation, every sense of separation, every burden of personal identity. What remains when all of that falls away is the stillness beneath all thought, the presence behind all form, the Christ, the I am, the infinite life that has always been your true self. You are no longer playing the role of a seeker, searching for God somewhere out there. You recognize yourself as an expression of God, the divine made manifest in human form. Leave in the comments, "I am ready to abide." If you've made it this far, something deeper than casual curiosity brought you here. The fact that you've stayed through this entire journey tells me you're genuinely ready for this shift in consciousness, and I'm grateful we could share this space together. This kind of content doesn't always find its way to those who need it most, which is why your engagement actually matters more than you might realize. If these insights resonated with you, if something clicked into place as we explored the Christ within and the power of the I am, I'd love for you to join this community by subscribing to the channel. This isn't just about watching videos. It's about continuing a conversation that has the potential to genuinely transform how you experience your own spiritual nature. Each video we create here is designed to go deeper into these truths that mainstream spirituality often overlooks. And here's how I know who really connected with this message. Drop a comment below saying, "This message was meant for me." When I see that, I know we're speaking the same language, walking the same path. Your comment also helps this video reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. If you found value here today, a simple like goes a long way in helping this content reach more people who are ready for it. It's a small gesture that creates a ripple effect you might not even see, but it matters. Now there's a video right here that takes what we just explored even deeper into practical application. Click and continue with me over there, because this journey is just beginning, and what comes next might be exactly what you need to hear right now. I'll see you there. Have you ever felt paralyzed by a decision, frozen in doubt, desperately waiting for some unmistakable sign from heaven that never arrives? You're standing at a crossroads. Maybe it's about leaving a job that's draining your soul, ending a relationship that no longer serves you, or taking a financial risk that could change everything, and you find yourself looking up, pleading for clarity, for just one clear message from God telling you which way to go. But instead of divine certainty, you're met with what feels like crushing silence, and that silence amplifies the doubt until it becomes deafening. If you've ever experienced this agonizing weight, you're not alone, and what I'm about to reveal might completely transform how you experience divine guidance in every area of your life. The truth is, we've been taught to search for God's voice in all the wrong places. From our earliest memories, we've been conditioned to believe that divine wisdom comes from somewhere outside ourselves, from religious authorities, from ancient scriptures, from the heavens above, from anywhere except the one place where it's been speaking all along. This fundamental misunderstanding is why so many of us feel spiritually abandoned precisely when we need guidance the most. Has this ever happened to you? You face a critical choice about your career, your health, your finances, or your relationships, and instead of hearing clear direction, you're overwhelmed by conflicting thoughts, second-guessing every option, tormented by the fear of making the wrong decision. The doubt becomes so intense that it paralyzes you completely, and in that paralysis, you convince yourself that maybe you're not spiritual enough, not worthy enough, not devoted enough to deserve God's guidance. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what most people never realize. The doubt you're experiencing isn't evidence that God isn't speaking to you. It's actually a signal that you're listening to the wrong voice entirely. There are two distinct voices operating within your consciousness at all times. One is the voice of fear, anxiety, and doubt, which sounds urgent, chaotic, and demanding. The other is the voice of divine wisdom, which speaks with quiet certainty, gentle clarity, and unshakable peace. The problem isn't that God's voice is absent, it's that we've never learned to distinguish it from the noise of doubt that drowns it out. Stay with me until the end of this teaching, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally shift how you make decisions, not just in moments of crisis, but in the countless small choices that shape your daily experience. The 5 daily shifts we're going to explore aren't complicated spiritual practices requiring hours of meditation or years of training. They're simple, practical adjustments in awareness that anyone can implement immediately, and they have the power to silence doubt and reveal the inner voice that's been guiding you all along. Now, I want to go even deeper into what makes this transformation so radically different from everything else you've tried. The voice you've been seeking in the clouds, in church buildings, in the words of spiritual teachers, and sacred texts has been closer to you than your own heartbeat this entire time. Think about that for a moment. While you've been looking outward, straining to hear some distant voice from the heavens, divine wisdom has been flowing through your consciousness like a river that never stops moving. The kingdom of heaven isn't a destination you need to reach through years of spiritual practice or religious devotion. It's not reserved for saints or mystics or those who've achieved some elevated status. It's already inside you right now, in this very moment, whether you're aware of it or not. This revelation changes absolutely everything about how you approach decisions. Most of us have been taught that accessing divine guidance requires tremendous effort, longer prayers, deeper meditation, more intense devotion, stricter discipline. We exhaust ourselves trying to become worthy enough, spiritual enough, pure enough to finally deserve God's attention. But here's the hidden truth that might actually surprise you. The straining itself is creating the very problem you're trying to solve. The harder you try to grasp divine wisdom through sheer force of will, the more internal noise you create that drowns out the gentle voice already speaking within you. It's like trying desperately to remember someone's name. The more you force it, the more elusive it becomes. But the moment you relax and stop pushing, it surfaces effortlessly. I create these videos for seekers ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation. If this resonated with you, subscribe and join this community, learning to hear God's voice in everyday decisions. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and instead of immediately reaching for your phone to scroll through the anxiety-inducing noise of the world, you pause for just a few seconds and sense that quiet presence within you. Not something you have to manufacture through effort or conjure up through complicated techniques, but something that's simply there, patiently waiting to be acknowledged. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding at work, the one that normally triggers immediate defensiveness and fear, you approach it with a clarity that surprises even you. The financial decision that's been keeping you awake at night, generating endless scenarios of catastrophe in your mind, suddenly the right path becomes obvious, not through obsessive analysis alone, but through an inner knowing that transcends mere calculation. The relationship tension that normally activates every insecurity you carry, you find yourself responding from a place of groundedness that feels both unfamiliar and deeply natural at the same time. This transformation doesn't require you to become someone different or to achieve some impossible spiritual standard. It happens through simple shifts in awareness, micro-adjustments in perception that reconnect you with the wisdom that's been broadcasting within you all along. Behind the scenes of every decision you've ever made that felt genuinely right, that brought unexpected peace even when it didn't make logical sense to others, was this inner voice guiding you. You just may not have recognized it consciously at the time. The journey ahead isn't about adding more obligations to your already overwhelming schedule or mastering complex spiritual techniques. It's about remembering what you've always known, but somehow forgot in the noise of external conditioning. If you're beginning to sense that there might be another way to navigate your choices, one that doesn't leave you exhausted from overthinking or paralyzed by fear of making the wrong move, write in the comments, "I'm ready to listen differently." The transformation I'm about to share with you happens through 5 daily shifts, and I want to be completely honest about what these actually are. They're not complicated rituals that demand you wake up an hour earlier or carve out sacred time from an already overwhelming schedule. These are micro-shifts in awareness, subtle adjustments in perception that can happen while you're sitting in traffic, standing in line at the grocery store, or lying in bed just before sleep. The real power lies in learning to distinguish between 2 very different frequencies operating within you. The anxious, fear-based thinking that creates mental chaos, and the quiet, steady voice of divine wisdom that never shouts, never forces itself upon you, but always speaks with unmistakable clarity when you're attuned to hear it. The first shift is going to surprise you because it contradicts everything our achievement-oriented culture has taught us about spiritual growth. We've been conditioned from every direction to believe that hearing God's voice requires tremendous effort, that we need longer prayers, more intense devotion, stricter discipline, deeper sacrifice. We push ourselves harder, trying to prove we're worthy enough, dedicated enough, spiritual enough to finally deserve divine guidance. But here's the transformative truth that changes the entire journey. The strain itself is creating the very problem you're trying to solve. Every time you try grasping divine wisdom through effort alone, through sheer force of spiritual willpower, you're actually generating more internal noise that drowns out the gentle voice you're desperately seeking. Think about how this plays out in your actual experience. You face a major decision, and immediately your mind goes into overdrive, analyzing every angle, researching every possibility, consulting everyone you know, praying with increasing desperation for clarity. The more urgently you push for an answer, the more confused you become. The harder you strain to hear divine direction, the more elusive it seems. It's exactly like trying to remember a name that sits just beyond your conscious reach. The more you force it, clench your mind around it, demand that it appear, the further away it drifts. But the moment you release the strain, the moment you stop pushing and simply relax into receptivity, suddenly the name surfaces effortlessly, as if it was there all along waiting for you to get out of your own way. Divine guidance operates on this exact same principle. The kingdom of heaven within you isn't playing some cosmic game of hide and seek, testing whether you can pray intensely enough or meditate long enough to finally break through some invisible barrier. The wisdom you need is already broadcasting continuously, like a radio station that never goes off the air, transmitting on a frequency that becomes crystal clear the moment you stop straining and simply recognize what's already present. This shift from effort to awareness, from forcing to allowing, from achieving to receiving, fundamentally changes how you experience every decision point in your life. Behind the scenes of what looks like sudden clarity or unexpected insight is often just this dynamic. Consciousness relaxing, enough to perceive what was always there. If this understanding about releasing the strain and choosing simple recognition resonates with something you've experienced, write in the comments, "I choose awareness over effort." Your mornings hold a power that most people completely overlook, and understanding this could be the single most impactful shift in how you access divine guidance throughout your entire day. Those first few seconds after you wake up, before your mind floods with the day's demands, before anxiety about pending decisions creeps in, before you reach for your phone and immediately immerse yourself in everyone else's reality, that's sacred ground. And here's what makes this so revolutionary. This isn't about adding another obligation to your morning routine or setting your alarm earlier to squeeze in some complicated spiritual practice. It's about a simple recognition that takes less time than checking your first text message. Before your feet even touch the floor, tomorrow morning, pause for just one breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The kingdom of heaven is within me right now, and divine guidance is my natural state of being. These aren't magical incantations or empty words you're repeating mindlessly. They're recognition statements that align your awareness with reality, establishing a foundational frequency that colors everything that follows. That meeting where you need to make a difficult decision, you enter it already anchored in divine wisdom, rather than operating from anxiety. The conversation that usually triggers your most reactive patterns, you approach it from a completely different foundation. The financial choice that normally paralyzes you with fear, you navigate it with access to clarity that your panic-driven mind simply cannot perceive. What most people get completely wrong about spiritual practice is thinking that transformation requires intensity and drama. We live in a culture obsessed with breakthrough moments and life-altering peak experiences, so we approach our spiritual growth the same way. We wait until we hit a crisis, then throw ourselves into hours of desperate prayer, hoping that sheer intensity will finally crack open the heavens and deliver the guidance we need. But here's the hidden truth behind genuine transformation. 5 minutes of gentle daily recognition will reshape how you hear divine guidance far more profoundly than occasional marathon sessions fueled by panic and fear. Your consciousness doesn't respond to dramatic overhauls the way our achievement culture suggests. Instead, it operates like a garden. You don't ignore the plants for weeks and then dump gallons of water on them in a single desperate attempt at revival. That approach creates damage, not growth. Real cultivation happens through small amounts of consistent nourishment, and the garden naturally flourishes. Your ability to distinguish God's voice from the noise of doubt works exactly the same way. Each time you pause to recognize that inner presence, each morning, you begin with that simple acknowledgement. You're making subtle adjustments to your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning yourself to divine frequency with increasing precision. The journey isn't about occasional heroic efforts. It's about consistent micro-shifts that accumulate into profound transformation over time. If you're beginning to see how small, consistent practices could change everything about how you make decisions, write in the comments, consistency creates clarity. The transformation becomes tangible when you understand how these principles apply to the actual moments of your day. Throughout any given day, you encounter dozens of decision points that happen so quickly you barely register them as choices at all. Your boss delivers criticism that normally triggers immediate defensiveness. Traffic makes you late for an important meeting, and panic starts flooding your system. An unexpected bill arrives in your inbox, and financial anxiety grips your chest. These moments seem to happen to you, as if you have no control over how they unfold. But there's something remarkable happening that most people never notice. You have approximately 3 seconds before your conditioned responses take over completely. 3 seconds. That's the window where choice actually exists, where you can insert awareness into situations that previously triggered automatic reactions. In those 3 seconds, even 30 seconds if you can create the space, you have the opportunity to return to that inner kingdom we've been discussing, accessing divine clarity that sees beyond the surface appearances of whatever challenge you're facing. This is the sacred pause, and it's where the second major shift reveals its power in perhaps the most fear-inducing area of human experience: decisions about your health and well-being. If you found value in what we explored together, consider tapping that like button, not for algorithms, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered. Think about what happens when your body sends signals that trigger immediate fear. You notice an unusual symptom, a persistent pain, something that just feels off. Within seconds, your mind spirals into worst-case scenarios. You're researching symptoms online, each search result confirming darker possibilities. Your entire focus narrows exclusively to the physical problem, and here's what's crucial to understand. In this state of panic, your spiritual awareness shuts down completely. The connection to inner guidance that was available just moments before becomes inaccessible, drowned out by the deafening noise of fear. You make decisions about your health from this place of terror, and those decisions carry a completely different quality than choices made from peace. The second shift happens when you learn to pause before allowing panic to hijack your consciousness entirely. Before you spiral into catastrophic thinking, before fear closes off your access to divine wisdom, you create sacred space by recognizing a deeper truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, only wholeness and divine perfection exist. Now, this isn't about denying physical reality or rejecting medical wisdom. That would be foolish and dangerous. It's about creating the internal environment where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being, guiding you toward appropriate action from a foundation of peace rather than terror. The decisions you make about seeking care, choosing treatments, managing symptoms, all of these carry profound impact when they emerge from clarity rather than panic. Behind the scenes of what many call healing is often this exact dynamic: consciousness aligned with divine wholeness, creating pathways for well-being that remain completely blocked when fear dominates awareness. If you've experienced how fear can completely shut down your ability to hear clearly in health situations, write in the comments, "Peace guides my healing." This same principle of creating sacred pause before fear takes over becomes absolutely critical in another area, where panic drowns out divine guidance more quickly than almost anywhere else: your relationship with money and provision. Financial concerns trigger something primal within us, activating survival instincts that create such intense internal static that hearing God's voice becomes virtually impossible. You check your bank balance and feel your chest tighten. An unexpected expense arrives and panic floods your entire system. Your income suddenly decreases, and you're making desperate decisions from a place of scarcity and urgency that completely overrides any access to spiritual wisdom. The third shift happens when you learn to move from scarcity consciousness to recognizing abundance from the kingdom perspective. Divine substance isn't limited by what's currently in your account, or what the economy is doing, or what your employer decides. It's infinite and omnipresent, and here's what revolutionizes your financial experience. Your actual encounter with provision primarily reflects your consciousness, not just external economic conditions. This doesn't mean positive thinking magically creates money, or that you ignore practical financial planning. That would be naive. It means that when you bring kingdom awareness to money decisions, you access divine intelligence that sees possibilities your anxious, scarcity-focused mind simply cannot perceive. Picture yourself sitting at your kitchen table with bills spread out in front of you, and the numbers just don't add up. Your old pattern would spiral immediately into catastrophic thinking, losing sleep over scenarios that haven't even happened. But when you've cultivated this shift in consciousness, something fundamentally different occurs. You pause and recognize that divine wisdom sees solutions beyond what your panic can access. You still take practical action, you still address the situation responsibly, but you're doing so from transformed awareness that allows creativity and opportunity to emerge. Behind the scenes of what others might call breakthrough or unexpected provision is often just this dynamic: consciousness aligned with abundance, expressing itself through practical circumstances in ways that logic alone could never predict. The fourth shift addresses perhaps the most emotionally complex area of human experience: your relationships. Think about your most challenging relationship right now. Maybe it's your spouse who seems to trigger every insecurity you carry, a parent whose approval you've been seeking your entire life, or a colleague whose behavior constantly sparks frustration. Your conditioned response focuses entirely on what's wrong with them, how they need to change, why they're making your life difficult, what you wish they would finally understand. But here's the hidden truth that changes relational dynamics. The catalyst for transformation isn't finding perfect people or waiting for others to finally become who you want them to be. It's developing perfect listening to God's voice through every single interaction, especially the difficult ones. When you approach relationships from kingdom consciousness, you access guidance about how to respond rather than react, what to say in moments of tension when silence serves better, and how to set boundaries from love rather than from fear or manipulation. If you're beginning to see how consciousness shifts could transform your experience with money and relationships, write in the comments, "Divine wisdom sees what I cannot." The fifth shift addresses an area where most of us spend the majority of our waking hours, yet rarely consider it spiritual territory at all. For most people, their professional environment represents a complete spiritual dead zone where divine presence seems distant, irrelevant, entirely disconnected from the practical demands of getting work done. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, performance expectations, competition, all of this creates such a dense frequency of stress that any awareness of God's voice gets completely drowned out. You might pray before leaving for work, but the moment you step into that office or log into that computer, it's as if you've entered a realm where spiritual guidance simply doesn't apply. But the transformation happens when you reframe work from mere employment, from something you endure to pay, and builds into spiritual expression itself. That project deadline that usually triggers anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging through you in perfect timing. That difficult colleague who normally sparks immediate frustration becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and them, accessing wisdom about how to navigate the dynamic rather than just reacting to their behavior. This shift doesn't require changing careers or finding spiritually oriented employment. It happens through bringing presence to whatever work you're already doing, recognizing that divine creativity can express itself through spreadsheets and sales calls just as readily as through traditionally spiritual activities. The impact extends far beyond productivity metrics to transform the actual quality of your daily experience. And behind the scenes of truly innovative work is often exactly this dynamic. Unlimited intelligence flowing through consciousness that's open enough to receive it. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice of these 5 shifts, something precious emerges that goes beyond any specific benefit in health, finances, relationships, or career. You awaken to an authentic peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect, on everything going your way, or on finally having all your problems solved. This isn't the artificial calm that comes from temporarily having everything under control. It's a foundational tranquility that transcends whatever situation you're facing. Financial setbacks still require practical action and wise decision-making, but you navigate them without the paralysis of fear that used to shut down your ability to think clearly. Relationship difficulties still need to be addressed, conversations still need to happen, boundaries still need setting, but you approach them without the emotional reactivity that used to make everything more complicated and painful. The hidden truth here is profound. When you position yourself to hear God's voice clearly through these daily shifts, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, though that certainly flows more readily. What emerges is something deeper, an unshakable foundation that remains steady, regardless of external conditions, becoming the ground from which all your decisions arise. If you're sensing how this foundation of peace could transform not just your decisions, but your entire experience of life, write in the comments, "Peace is my foundation." Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this journey actually demands, because the pathway to silencing doubt and hearing God's voice clearly requires something that challenges everything our instant gratification culture has conditioned us to expect. This transformation unfolds through consistent commitment regardless of immediate results. This isn't a weekend workshop that produces instant enlightenment or a 21-day challenge that permanently transforms your awareness in one dramatic sweep. The journey is different for everyone, and understanding this removes so much unnecessary frustration and self-judgment that derails people before they ever experience the breakthrough waiting just beyond their impatience. Some people begin practicing these 5 shifts and experience remarkable changes within weeks, suddenly finding clarity in decisions that used to paralyze them, sensing divine guidance with a certainty they've never felt before. Others practice diligently for months before significant shifts become visible in their actual experience. A few grow impatient when miracles don't materialize on their preferred timeline and abandon the practice altogether, never discovering what was just beginning to emerge beneath the surface of their awareness. The decisive factor between these different experiences isn't spiritual talent or some kind of divine favoritism where God likes certain people more than others. It's simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing that inner presence, even when immediate evidence doesn't scream validation at you. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your own life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that fundamentally reshapes your experience rather than just creating temporary excitement, almost always unfolds through accumulated small decisions rather than singular dramatic moments. Your consciousness works exactly the same way, gradually tuning itself to divine frequency with increasing precision through consistent practice. Each morning you pause for that simple recognition. Each sacred moment you insert awareness into a reactive pattern. Each time you choose peace over panic in health or financial decisions. These aren't insignificant gestures. They're making subtle adjustments to your spiritual receptors that compound over time into profound transformation. But here's perhaps the most liberating truth of everything. We've explored together, and this removes every excuse, eliminates every barrier between where you are right now and the guidance you're seeking. You can begin this very moment, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology first, or accumulate years of meditation experience, or achieve some elevated spiritual status before you're qualified to hear God's voice. The kingdom of heaven exists within you right now, at this very moment, exactly as you are. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge through whatever decision you're facing. Your ability to hear divine guidance isn't something you need to build through years of arduous effort. It's something you simply recognize as already complete within your consciousness, already broadcasting, already available to you in this breath. If you're ready to begin this journey right now, without waiting for perfect conditions or more. Spiritual preparation. Write in the comments, "I begin today." If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're exactly the kind of person this message was meant to reach. There's something in you that's already awakening to these truths, already recognizing the divine presence that's been speaking within you all along. That recognition brought you here, and it's going to continue guiding you forward in ways you can't even imagine yet. I create these videos for people like you seekers, who are ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation, into actually hearing God's voice in the practical, everyday decisions that shape your life. If this teaching resonated with something deep inside you, if even one insight shifted your awareness, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people learning to live from this consciousness. Each video we explore together translates these profound spiritual truths into steps you can actually implement today, not someday when you're more ready or more spiritual. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, if you sense you were meant to hear this today, write in the comments, "This message was meant for me." Your acknowledgement, your story, your recognition might be exactly what another person scrolling through needs to hear to begin their own awakening. There's real power in declaring these truths, even if it's just through a few typed words. And if you found value in what we explored together, if this conversation created even a small shift in how you understand divine guidance, consider tapping that like button, not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered, that these truths still have power to transform lives in our distracted, anxious world. There's a video right here about maintaining this connection to divine guidance, even when life gets overwhelming, when circumstances seem to contradict everything we've discussed today. It's a natural continuation of this journey, showing you how to sustain this awareness through the challenges that inevitably arise. Click and continue with me over there as we go deeper into living from this consciousness. Until we meet again, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, and God's voice is already speaking. You're simply learning to recognize what has always been true.